After the Battle of Trenton, the British forces led by Commander Cornwallis was led all the way down to Trenton, New Jersey. At this point, George Washington's forces were resting there after the battle they had just fought against the German mercenaries, or other known as the Hessians. Cornwallis entered the Trenton area, wanting to rest his troops, with the intentions of attacking George Washington's army across the Ossipink River the next day. During this time, Washington took the advantage of sneaking his troops out around Cornwallis towards Princeton. In order to properly fool Cornwallis into thinking George Washington was still sitting in Trenton, Washington left behind several hundred of his soldiers to keep the fires burning and to make believe that they were still there. During this time, Washington slid out around Cornwallis into Princeton. At daybreak of January 3, 1777, Washington had effectively established his forces outside of Princeton. In doing so, Brigadier General Hugh Mercer had encountered British forces leaving Princeton at the time. The head of those British forces was Lieutenant Colonel Mawhood, who was en route to meeting up with Cornwallis after leaving some small forces at Princeton University. Mawhood had guided Mercer away from his primary objective, which is to capture the bridge leading over the Stony Creek, which led into Princeton. Capturing this would have cut off Princeton completely from all other British forces. Leading the main assault party into Princeton, George Washington hears of the gunshots from Mercer and immediately engages his forces into battle. From this point, George Washington rallies his men with much courage, leadership, and poise, guiding them to quite an easy victory over the British, leaving many of the British forces running away from the battlefield in terror. George Washington referred to it as quite a fox hunt for his soldiers. Though there was fighting all around the perimeter of Princeton, no conflicts were actually taking place in Princeton itself, though General John Sullivan and his army chased small British forces into Princeton University, where they trapped themselves. Legend has it that one of the American cannonballs had gone through the window of Nassau Hall, the principal building of Princeton University, and had actually decapitated a portrait of King George II himself. Many say the soldiers took that as a really bad sign, and immediately surrendered after that happened. To this day, cannonball dents can clearly be seen alongside of Princeton University. By dawn, Cornwallis had learned about George Washington's whereabouts, as well as what has been happening in Princeton. As frustrated as Cornwallis was, he led all of his forces up Stony Creek through harsh weather conditions and frigid waters, only to find that Washington had fled the scene of Princeton. Understanding the situation at hand, George Washington had to make a big decision. Seeing all the momentum that George Washington had built up over the past victories, he realized that he could possibly take New Brunswick and everything that it had, or he can rest his soldiers knowing that Cornwallis was chasing after him. After much thought, George Washington decided to take his men to Morristown, where he'd finished setting up winter encampments on January 6th. Among the casualties of the battle, the British lost 286, including casualties and captive, where the Americans only lost 40. The most important American loss of the battle, though, was Brigadier General Hugh Mercer. In the end, a lot of positives can be taken from the Battle of Princeton as well as the Battle of Trenton. Ultimately, the victories improved the outlook on the war and the morale of the American forces. The French were also encouraged by the American efforts over the past few days. Most importantly, George Washington was finally able to establish victories against the British and take territories away from them. In conclusion, George Washington was able to lead a successful campaign in New Jersey, which sets up for further success.